Thank you, David. And we continue with a reflection on Scripture. The 4th of July, the day we mark as the birthday of our country, indeed carries an invitation for us to take in a long view, to look back, to remember the aspirations and commitments, the independence and the interdependence that form what we mean when we say we, the people. As a country, we do so with a sense of pride, but also with a sense of humility. Pride because the ideals of our democratic experiment are still worthy and inspiring. They have survived the test of time. They continue to speak to us and organize us. They form our life together. And humility, because we know that the work of ensuring those unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is far from complete. David and I were both reminded anew this past week, for instance, that all of our founding documents speak of men, and that there's no getting around the fact that for all of their visionary brilliance, our forebears really did mean men, not women, and men, only white men. Those exclusions were not merely a reflection of their times, they're an expression of a tragic flaw evident in much of human history, one that we still, even after all these years, continue to wrestle with and work on correcting. Recently, we've all become concerned by the renewed brutishness of our social and political climate, by the partisanship that has degenerated into polarized factions, by the competitive tribalism growing in strength, and by the incidence of fresh acts of terrorism that horrify us on an almost weekly basis. Of course, that brutishness is nothing new. Not long ago, a friend reminded me that the world in which Jesus was born and the church was formed, the early centuries of the Common Era, was worse. Much worse. A lot worse. Small comfort, I suppose, but the long view, the look back, is instructive, I think. In the ancient world, under the rule of Roman Empire, there were no democratic principles, no Bill of Rights, nothing resembling the US Constitution. There was no health insurance or old age Social Security or public welfare program. A mighty military occupation lorded it over peasants in ways that were unapologetically merciless, ruling more by sword than by law. Slavery was sanctioned and customary. The gap between the rich and the poor was enormous. Women were the property of men. Infant mortality was normative. The practice of infanticide was permitted and prevalent. Crucifixion, a gruesome form of torture and death, was a regular practice of punishment and crowd control. Into that world, Jesus came to preach a message of good news for the poor. He came feeding the hungry, healing the sick, noticing the vulnerable, speaking truth to power, and bringing the marginalized into the care of the community. It was in the midst of that world that his followers came together, even after he was gone, to carry on the way of life he shared with them, bearing witness to this different way of being in the world. A way radically different than dog eat dog, different than every man out for himself, different than might makes right. In the middle of the tension between these two very different ways of being, the empire and the church, the Apostle Paul wrote a letter to the Christians in Corinth. It was evident that the Roman order, with its assumptions about power and privilege, had seeped into this fledgling Christian community. Some members were claiming that they were more important than others, boasting that their gifts were greater, making a more significant contribution to the congregation's life. The one-upsmanship was causing dissension. So in response, in chapter 12, Paul addresses the issues of difference and inequality head on in ways that speak powerfully to us still and inform who we are. He starts by borrowing an image common in classical literature, an analogy between the human body and human society. It was one often used to strengthen the authoritarian social order. The wealthy, the elite, get to be the head, and the poor peasants work as the hands and the feet. Paul, however, takes this image with which everyone would have been familiar, and he completely subverts it. He lifts up the importance of every gift, and in so doing, he flattens out the hierarchy. He then flips the body on its head, saying that those parts that have been considered the lowest, the weakest, the most vulnerable, are deserving of special attention. Paul doesn't want to delete the differences. Instead, he points out that the differences are not only acceptable, they are to be expected. And more, in order for the body to work well, differences are essential. This diversity, Paul says, is the work of God's Spirit, who gives the body every gift we need in order to flourish. And because the Spirit is the source, every difference is not only valuable, it's indispensable. One gift is not greater than any other. Every God-given voice, perspective, personality, experience, offering, talent, skill, and service makes an important contribution to the whole. Every part is essential to what Paul calls the common good. He continues then to sum up his celebration of the parts of the body with an observation that expresses more fully what he means by the common good. When one member suffers, all suffer with it. When one member is honored, all rejoice. This is the interdependence that knits us together. We lean on each other's strengths. We lighten each other's load. We enjoy each other's gifts. And since then, we've learned other truths which resonate deeply with this passage. That we're at our best when we open ourselves to learn from one another's perspectives, when we allow ourselves to stretch and influence each other's minds, and when we work together to find, create, and ensure the common good. Sounds remarkably democratic, doesn't it? Of course, Paul knew nothing about that, nor did Jesus, but because of Jesus and the church that gathered and grew in his name, we know what it means to be a community that prizes diversity and inclusion over competition, humility over pride, compassion instead of violence, forgiveness rather than retaliation, and courage in the place of fear. Up against a mighty empire, Jesus and his followers certainly were not able to overthrow Roman rule, but their defiant witness mattered. It mattered to every single life they touched. It mattered so much that their values and practices became the plumb line by which moral behavior is measured. Even now, among us. Paul would want us to know that God's Spirit has already given us everything we need in order to flourish. We have the tools, the gifts, the gospel ethics, the moral center we need to bear witness to a way of life that stands against a world of division, tribalism, and terror. A way of life that rebukes a world of pure competition and might makes right. A way of life that wildly embraces the common good. This is who we are as people of faith. It's also who we are as citizens of a democracy. The need for us to answer this calling is no less now than it was in the days of Jesus and the early church. So will we? Will you? For Christ's sake, for the world's sake, for the sake of the common good, let's say yes.